so that I can achieve an even depth by rolling it on the playing cards. I've got a little bit of olive oil in a dish here. Be using it very sparingly, but you do need it for that bit of lubrication. I've got a selection of new paint brushes because you can't really mix paint brushes that you've been using with silver clay with anything like bronze or copper or iron. They all have to be kept separate. I've got a couple of knife blades which I've cleaned up and lubricated as well, so I'll be using those at some point, keeping them well out of the way. I've got a little rubber tool here for any kind of sculpting or adjustments or blending that I need to do, and I've got a new tool here which I've never used before. It's a pen tool for cutting shapes out of clay. I've got all sorts of pen tools, but I've never used this particular one before, but I must say that I'm liking the look of it because it's got a very, very fine pin on it, and also the handle is ergonomically shaped, so you hold it like a pen. If I can get a grip of it and show it you there. So I'm quite looking forward to using that tool. The other thing that I've got here, which is maybe a little bit different, is that I do like to do my rolling out between pieces of file cover. So I've got a couple here now which they've got a bit of a texture to them, which isn't ideal, but I'm just going to use it in the early stages for thinning out, and I've written the type of clay that it is on them so that I don't get it mixed up with any other kinds of clay. And I've also got a piece of acetate sheet here as well. I've done the same thing with it. It is ultra shiny and smooth, and I use that when I'm not going to do a texture and I want to get as smooth a surface as I can. So you'll see me using that a bit later on. In the meantime, I'm going to prepare my file cover sheet here, and although it really is very smooth, it still needs a bit of lubrication. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of the olive oil into the middle of the sheet. Just stops any potential sticking. When you do this, you don't need to oil the roller. You only need to oil the roller if it's actually coming in contact with the clay. So this is pretty handy. So I'm just wiping off any excess here. Get my clay out. Give it a last minute little roll and then put it on to one of the sheets. Now, it's very important when you're using rolling guides is that you then put them onto either directly onto your mat or onto any backing sheet or texture sheet that you're using. It's to keep the depths consistent. And then you just put the oil side of the top sheet onto the clay, and then I'm going to start rolling. And there's nothing really new about this. I'm just going to roll it in different directions just to get it thinned out a bit. And the beauty of doing this is that when you want to turn it to 90 degrees, you just turn the file cover round and you don't have to lift the clay or touch the clay. So I'm just going to do this. This is 7 cards thick at the moment, so it's making quite a big piece. So take the cards off and take it down to 6 cards. And then down to 5 cards. Now the first thing I want to do is I'm going to need for the kiln a couple of test strips. So I'm just going to take the top cover off and get my tissue blade. And I'm just going to take a little bit off the clay. The only reason I'm taking it off the file cover is because I don't want to cut a lump out of my file cover. So I'm just going to take a nice strip off. So this is 5 cards thick. It's quite elastic. And I'm going to make a little loop around it. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to press that very loosely around a cocktail stick. I don't know if you can see that. Try again. I'm not doing anything fancy, I'm just pressing it together because I just need a little loop for when I take it out of the kiln. So I'm just going to put that on one side to dry. Okay, and that'll be my test strip. And what'll happen is when I take it out of the kiln, I'll try bending it to see if it's properly sintered. The other test piece that I would like will be a little snake. So I've just balled up a piece of clay and I'm just going to put it on my table and run over it with the snake roller. And again, I'm just going to wrap a loop around that because this is going to be another of my test pieces. So just going to very loosely create a loop in the top of that and just pinch it together. It's not a work of art, it's just a test piece. And again, just going to put it on a playing card which I've oiled and leave it out to dry. Okay, so I'm still making test pieces, but this time I want to make a piece that realistically could become a piece of jewellery if I get it right. So I've rolled out a bit of my clay with the file covers down to 6 cards depth. I'm going to take the file cover away now and I'm going to transfer the clay onto a texture mat, and for this particular one I'm going to use this texture mat. It's called Plumes and it's one of my all-time favourite texture mats. It always gives you very good results. So I lay that on the table, and then what I need is 2 other mats of similar depth to place on either side. This is just to give me an extra width and working surface to place my guides on. So this time what I'm hoping to achieve is a double-sided texture, 5 cards thick. So just want to reduce my cards down to 5 on either side. So just make sure those are fitting close together. Place them side by side. Take the clay and press it down somewhere where you're hoping to get the texture right. So I need that the rolling guides sit fairly close to the clay and also cover up the seams where the 2 rubber mats are joining each other. So just try to get them as close as possible. You can see why I use the rubber mats as extensions. So everything is level with that surface, so everything is 5 cards deep. Now to make a nice simple texture at the back, what I've done is I've taken a piece of wallpaper and I've very lavishly oiled it to make sure it doesn't stick. I'm just going to place it very gently on the top of the clay, and then I'm going to get my roller here, and whereas previously you've seen me going backwards and forwards with my roller, which is fine when you're thinning out the clay, when you come to put a texture on you really need to do it in just one single firm roll. That's to ensure that you don't get a double image if you're using textures. If you move it backwards and forwards, it becomes squashed and blurred. There's two schools of thoughts on this. Some people roll forwards away from them, in which case you start at the bottom of the piece and roll forward, but bearing in mind that the clay stretches and will elongate and will fall off your mat if you do that. I have my own preference, which some people laugh at, but I like to start at the top of the guides and the top of the clay, position my roller very firmly on the top so I'm in really good contact with the rolling guides, put the heel of my hand onto the acrylic roller, and then draw it back in one firm press. And I'm just driving the roller back towards me, and if necessary it'll go across my hand and come off the fingertips and come off the rolling guides, but that's okay. So that's the back of the piece, and we'll have a look and see what kind of a texture we've got. So I'm going to flip this over onto an oiled playing card. That's come out quite nicely. And then what I need to do is just select a position for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my round templates. You can use either your sugar paste metal cutters, or you can use these round templates. Because I've got this pin tool, I'm going to use it and see if I can cut out a nice circle using it. So because it's iron and it's quite a thick piece, I want to get as large a circle as I can out of it. Be a bit more lavish than I can normally be with the silver clay. Okay, so I've positioned it over a part of the pattern that I particularly like, and I'm just going to leave it very gently on the top. Just going to see whether I can bring that a wee bit closer to the camera. Yeah, I think that's it. So I get my tool in my hand, and there's a little sort of an arched piece there which you rest over your middle finger, and then you bring your forefinger over the top and press down with it. It's really quite comfortable, and it's obviously an ambidextrous tool as well, which is good. Okay, so just start perpendicular to the template and just run round in one smooth run until I meet it at the other end, and that's it. Same thing as usual, you do need to oil the little tip of the pin. I'm just going to lift my template, take off my excess clay using the pin tool. That's come out quite well. Any raggedness I'll deal with when I'm sanding it after the first drying. Now, because this is just a test piece that's 5 cards thick and I just want to see what it comes out like, I'm just going to make a hole for a bail and leave it at that. So that's my guide hole for the jump ring. Okay, so that's another of my test pieces done and is going away to dry. I think I'm inclined to allow it to dry flat for a while before I introduce any heat to it. It's my belief, I think if you dry it flat for a while, it sort of minimises any warping or curling that you get. This is going to be another of my test pieces. Although it's going to be quite big and I hope it will become a really nice piece of jewellery, it's still at this stage is just going to be a test piece. I live in the country and a lot of my work is inspired by the environment around me. So everything that I do reflects insects, animals, birds, grasses, trees, you name it. I'm very keen on moulding as well, and sometimes I buy commercial moulds and sometimes I make my own moulds. It just depends on the project that I'm doing. Also, something that I'm quite keen on doing with these are sugar crafting moulds, and they come very large, sometimes certainly far too big for using with silver, which makes them too expensive to sell. So what I do is I make a first cast of them, and then when it's fired I then make myself another mould and I keep reducing them down smaller and smaller. So I get a whole range of different things, particularly insects, which I can use at different sizes and different projects. Also, what I do is to preserve the detail. When the piece is in the dry stage, I tend to carve it and burnish it so that I can keep a sharpness to the detail when it's fired, but also it's nice and sharp and crisp for when I make the second and the third moulds from it. So that's the mould I'm going to try and have a go at today. And what I need to do is I need to have a ball of clay that is really satiny smooth. So I've been conditioning this one and I've got it in my piece of cling film, and it's lovely, silky smooth and holding together beautifully. I need a piece that's about the size of the mould. Sometimes this is hard to gauge, so if this doesn't fit I'll have to start again, but we can only but try. So just make sure I've got no cracks. Oh, by the way, I've fully oiled this mould, and I would in any case, but I've never used this mould before, so it needs a particularly good oiling for the first time. So I've positioned the clay over the centre of the mould and hope that I've picked a piece that is big enough, and then I'm gradually just pressing it towards the different areas of the mould. It doesn't really matter if it's spilling out over the top of the mould at the moment. I prefer to get it just right and it be perfect, but it isn't always the case that you can do that. So I'm not pushing it about now that I've extended the clay into the different corners of the mould. What I'm just doing is patting it down very, very firmly into place. Then what I'm going to do is my piece of oiled acetate, which is my ultra smooth piece, I'm going to lay that on the top of the mould and take my roller and very gently I'm just going to try and flatten out the back of this piece, make it a wee bit smoother. Sometimes you get some little bumps and sinkages when you do this. Okay, now again I've got an oil playing card which I'll just put on the table. Very carefully peel my oil sheet off it, and then I'm going to pop this down onto the card. Some people do this when the clay is dry and some people do it when it's still moist. Okay, so I've turned the insect out of the mould now, and I have to say it's resembling a big lump of chocolate at the moment, so I'll have to restrain myself from not wanting to eat it. It's come out fairly crisp and sharp. It's got a bit of tidying up that needs to be done to it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I've oiled my little pick here, and I'm just going to go around the edges of the bee and just take off the excess clay. I'm going to go in as tight as I can, because that means that the less refinement that I need to do. So just go around this side as well and just pick out the little bits of waste pieces, and then I can just put them back into my clay package, or I might save them in a little jar and turn them into a paste for sticking things together when I'm in the dry stages. Either or really. So I've taken off as much as I'm going to take off with the little pick. The other thing which I can do then is to just go around the bottom edges with my paintbrush. And again, I'm just going to try and smooth off any little raggedy bits at this stage, using the water to smooth the clay. Again, it cuts down on the amount of sanding and filing that has to be done. I will be going over the details of the these little lines that make up the wings and the body, but I'm going to do that in the dry stage, and I'm going to use a burnisher and maybe a little carving tool, we'll see. Okay, I'm still making practice pieces for the kiln, and what I thought I would do is I would fall back on an old favourite, which is putting a leaf texture into a piece of clay. This is always a really good one for teaching beginners because it enables them to start using textures other than the commercially made textures. So if you can take the shape and the texture from a found item like a leaf, it's really good. So what I've done here is I have rolled my clay out to 5 cards deep. I'm going to try and go for a 4 card depth on this one now. I want a really big statement piece. I've read in the instructions that this clay can shrink by up to 18% after kilning, so I think it's quite good to start with a larger piece here. So earlier on I went out and I fetched a leaf from the hedge. I think it's a hazel leaf, I hope it is. The important thing about it is that it's a soft leaf, it's not hairy, it's not waxy, and it's got a really good vein structure on the back. So I've rolled out my clay and I've checked that the leaf is going to fit on it. So I'm just going to place the leaf up near the top part of the clay, and then I'm going to start to tap it down so that it's already making contact with the clay, because it will ruffle up a little bit when you start to roll it. And then I don't need to go too deeply with this, just enough to take the impression. So again, I'm going to try and do a single roll. Now this time I have oiled the roller a bit because the roller is going to come into contact with the clay to a certain extent. So here goes. So up at the top of the clay, start to roll down firmly, but not squashing it too much. Sometimes you have to sort of keep your finger ahead of the roller because the pressure starts to buckle the leaf and sort of maybe fold it up a little bit. Can't always be avoided, but try to minimize that if you can. So again, as I get towards the end of the piece of clay, then it's going to elongate a little bit and it'll accommodate the tip of the leaf. So that's it, I've rolled it. Just one more tap there just to make sure it's all making contact. And then here goes, first of all, before here goes, I'm going to cut out the leaf. So again, an oil playing card, remove the guide cards, take the clay off the backing sheet, but keep the leaf on top of the clay, so just peel it back a little bit and lay it on the card. So I'm going to use the card as the background, and I'm going to use the pin tool just to start to take bits of the excess clay out. Just going to sort of broadly keep the leaf shape where I can, as much as I can, keep the natural leaf shape. This particular leaf has a slightly serrated edge to it, which again we'll deal with in the refinement in the greenware stage. It can't be too sharp, obviously in case it scratches you, but we'll try to sort of keep that character of the edge of the leaf by doing a bit of filing and sanding just to give it an irregularity. So I'm just very roughly taking the excess clay off there. And just keeping my cling film to hand just to put the pieces into. Okay, so I'm about halfway there with it. Okay, just do this other side. Again, not being incredibly precise about it, just to get the excess away, because I can roll that up and use that in my next piece. Okay, that's that away. So there's the leaf sitting on it. Just peel it back, and there's a lovely leaf impression. Now, if the veins of the leaf have bitten down into the clay and split it, I will have to do a little bit of work on that in the dry stage. I'm going to have to do a bit of filling in. But I'm just going to leave it as it is for the moment. And what I'll probably do is I'll do a kind of a loop at the top of the leaf that is probably made out of a coil like a snake. And I'll use that both to attach the leaf and create a loop for the chain to go through, and also I'll use it just to fill in that wee sort of split. This is one of the downsides of using leaves. The veins do tend to split the clay a little bit, but anyway, it's an experiment.